Welcome, Brian. I'm very excited to have you here in the Philippines with us. This is Bjorn Martinoff, author of Develop Exponential Power. I'm also recommended by Marshall Goldsmith, and I'm very fortunate to have with me today the author of this amazing book that came out in 2007, Brian Underhill. The book's name is Executive Coaching for Results. I've actually owned this book myself for many years, and I'm very happy to receive an actual autographed copy today from the author himself. Brian and I have known each other for many, many years, but mostly in a virtual context, and for today we meet first time in person. So Brian, welcome to the Philippines. Maybe you can give a little bit of a context as what brought you here. I know your wife has a background here, but she's born in Guam, right? Your wonderful wife, Julie. Yeah, maybe give the listeners maybe just a tiny background about what brings you here.
Sure. Well, I tend to travel a lot every year anyways to visit our coaches around the world, and so I've been looking for a good excuse to come to the Philippines.
I feel very fortunate.
Yes, and my wife Julie is Filipina. She is American, but her whole family is here, and so after living in the States many years, she actually lived here through high school and college. We actually returned because she's a dentist, and I followed her along as she came to do some dental work in the provinces as a charity project, which was fabulous. And so that became our great excuse to come here.
Thank you for doing that. I'm sure the country will thank you for it as well.
The country has fewer teeth because of it now.
Fewer teeth?
Teeth being removed.
Oh my! All right, something to look forward to.
Yes.
I'm sure they will be replaced with something better, no?
Yes, hopefully.
Excellent. So Brian, you are the founder of this organization called CoachSource, right? And that's been in existence since when?
So I've been in the field about 20 years.
20 years.
The current version that we call CoachSource is nearing about 10 years in operation.
Okay, fantastic. Where were you at in terms of your career, and what inspired you to start CoachSource? Was it like a personal need, or was it an inspiration, or was it both?
Right. Well, so I started 20 years ago with Marshall Goldsmith.
Wonderful. How can you have a better start?
We were both saying endorsed both of our books, so we're rather proud of that.
I think we both love Marshall, right?
Yes.
We highly endorse him.
Yes. Great process, great methodology. And so when I started working for him, that's when coaching really started to come onto the forefront. I actually didn't know a lot about what coaching was until, and many of us didn't 20 years ago. And then we just started creating coaching processes and finding coaches around the world over time.
And come to think of it, that was a time before there was even an ICF, right?
That's correct, yes.
Or a Coach U, right?
Very new.
Yes.
And about mid-2000s, Marshall doesn't really like managing a coaching business. He loves to coach, of course, and to speak and to write.
He has a heart of gold, though.
He will tell anybody he hates managing large organizations. I actually enjoy that. So we kind of essentially spun off what would then become CoachSource in the mid-2000s.
So you were partners right from the beginning?
Right.
Wow.
When I first started to work with him and managing some of his coaching, the coaching implementations we were doing. But that becomes more of a burden for him, and so he wasn't interested in keeping that up, which I understood.
Was Marshall as big as he is today then?
Oh no, it was a growing thing.
It was a growing thing.
When I first met him, he had just written his first book, and he was a really well sought after high level trainer, so a company would hire him to do leadership trainings. We did a couple of tens of thousands of 360 feedback debriefs every year.
Wow.
And he was just starting to do more keynotes, and then over the time, that all just exploded as the field grew. He started to be a keynoter in many more in places, written tons and tons of books from that point on, and the rest is history.
His first book was What Got You Here, What Got You There, or was this one of the first books?
He actually has lots of edited books where he's the head editor. And the first one was actually called The Leader of the Future, which was done with Frances Hesselbein and the Drucker Foundation.
Oh, wow.
And that was
famous names themselves.
Famous names, and I want to say roughly 1996. About 1996, I think, when that book came out. And he did a variety of edited books before What Got You Here came out, which was much later.
Okay, but that was his first book under his name,
under himself,
not being the editor.
Correct.
Wow, fantastic,
Right.
fantastic. And then you wrote your own book. How long after that?
So let's see, that'd be about 2005. We engaged in an industry-wide research study.
Okay.
We did that in partnership with a company called Executive Networks.
Okay.
They run real high-level networks of HR people and leadership development people.
Kind of like Best Practice Institute.
Best Practice Institute idea, right? And their members were saying, you know, this coaching thing is really becoming more and more important at our company, but we're not sure what to do with it and how to make the most of it. And so, could you commission a study to look at executive coaching?
Okay.
And that's exactly what Executive Networks did, and they had me lead that study.
Okay.
And then that became our research in 2005.
Okay.
It was really the first of its kind of a industry-wide, three-dimensional research study, because we didn't just talk to companies, we then compared that to what executives who had been coached were saying and what coaches were saying. So we had three different views on the industry when we ran that study in 2005. And that actually became the origin of this book, which then was 2007, because the companies involved all thought it would be a great idea to write a book, and I was excited to try to do that. And we didn't have a whole lot of time to write it because the publisher was very keen to get a coaching book out.
Wow.
So
how much time did you have?
About 6 months total.
Okay, that's pretty quick.
Yeah.
For a new book in a new industry, right?
Yes, exactly.
That's always extra difficult. It's very different when you write the 200th book in an industry, you're not one of the first. You know?
Right. Yes.
Because when I got into coaching, there was hardly any books on coaching at all. I mean, I think Tony Robbins wrote one of the first, and he didn't even call it a book on coaching.
Right.
It was more about personal growth and transformation.
Yeah, when we wrote this book, there were a lot of coaching books out, but they were all on, here's my method of coaching.
Yes,
Here's how to coach. And there were some books on, here's how to market your coaching practice. So those were the kinds of books we were seeing in the mid-2000s.
Okay.
So this was the first to say, no, this is what's going on in executive coaching. This is what companies are doing.
And I think that's just important to distinguish, because the coaching market has many differentiating factors nowadays, right? It started pretty much as just coaching, but then now we have life coaches, we have acting coaches, we have sports coaches, we have, almost every profession has their own sort of niche of coaches, right? And some of them, even the compensation levels are very different, especially between, imagine if someone coaches supervisor level or managerial level, it's going to be priced very different from a executive level, C-level, or even a CEO level.
Right.
How did that develop from your perspective? Do you have a perspective on that?
Well, it's interesting because we were doing what we were calling executive coaching, and then really simultaneously you started to see other applications of coaching, very much unrelated perhaps in origin.
Yes.
So the whole life coaching movement, which I believe was kind of a mid-90s origin, and it came from different influences, different founding fathers perhaps, than some of what I was observing in executive coaching.
Yes.
And I think to this day, the industry still struggles a bit with a confusion over what is coaching exactly, and what is executive coaching. For me, it's hard because on an airplane, it's hard for me to explain in one sentence what we do. And most people will think, you're a life coach. Yes. Or they'll say, you must be a motivational speaker. I get that sometimes.
Yeah, we're like motivational speakers for one person, right?
Yes. I joke, if I was a motivational speaker, I'd work on motivating myself, actually. First, I think I could use some of those techniques.
Yeah, I always say that as coaches, we always have to also create breakthroughs for ourselves, because if we cannot create breakthroughs for ourselves, how can we create breakthroughs for others or help others create breakthroughs?
Very true.
Do you have that same experience?
Oh, absolutely. If I'm asking a client to try something, either I've tried it or I'm going to make myself try it. So, for example, we have, many of us enjoy a process, and I think Marshall inspired us to this, where we try and measure a couple of key behaviors we're trying to improve daily, right? So at the end of the day, I have an app on my phone that asks me whether I did certain key things I've been trying to work on to improve myself.
Oh, nice.
And I like to ask the people I'm coaching to do the same thing because I think it keeps it top of mind.
Yeah, you could actually put this in your calendar, right? If
Yes.
you wanted to, right? Just
Yeah, the
calendar, all of a sudden the alarm goes off. Question, did
Yes.
you work on right? And then it's like, ooh, did I or did I not, right?
The phone phone's getting good at nagging us for this purpose.
They really are.
And so I have this app that pops up at certain times a day, and it's checking in on certain things I said I wanted to do. Am I actually doing it?
Beautiful.
So I asked people I'm coaching to do the same thing, and that's just one example of where I can't ask them to do this if I'm not trying to get better myself and share with them some of the learnings and the failures and the successes I've had.
Yeah. In so many ways, I think, being an executive coach myself, I realize many of my clients, they don't really have the time to do so many things that they should be doing, like maybe reading the latest books or taking the latest classes or participating in research on where is leadership going to go. Because my sense, I'm not sure if you agree, but leadership itself is evolving. Do you have that sense as well?
Absolutely. The key competencies that leaders need to demonstrate seem to evolve over time. And the world continues to get more complex, more globalized. We've had obviously this wave of technology over the past 20 years that have completely changed how business is being done. And those all put pressures on leaders.
Yes.
We see companies, for example, that are expanding overseas and they don't have enough developed leaders to grow, and that's often pointed to by organizations as one of the top challenges. They don't have enough leaders who can actually grow the business the way they need. And so coaching is one of those interventions that produces fast growth.
So one thing I would say, there's when you go to a hospital into the infant care unit and you look at the babies, you don't see any leaders there. Right, so sometimes we ask ourselves, are leaders born, right, or are they developed? But I've never seen a leader in the infant care unit, right, and it's diapers. So my sense is leaders are developed or they grow, right, and so I think that's always going to give us something to do as coaches. What qualifies a coach to coach on leadership? Would you say?
There's two big buckets that we have to look at. And this is coming from what clients are asking for and some of what we've observed in matching leaders with coaches. One bucket is in the whole area of business experience. Preferably, companies are looking for coaches who've been in business, who understand the language of business, preferably who've even been senior level executives themselves in CEO roles, managing director, vice president. That's not always the case for coaches, and I can explain that in a little bit, but the more business experience a coach seems to have, the more the executive appreciates that. And we get requests a lot for, I need a coach, and I'm trying to fix this behavior, but for some reason the coach needs to have done my job before, except at a much higher level, and then I'll be able to respect them as a coach, even though what we're trying to fix is a behavior that has nothing to do with this business experience. But that's one of the big buckets, is what kind of business experience does the coach have, which automatically will rule out life coaches and other types of coaches who don't have that credibility in business per se. And then the other bucket, of course, is how do we know that someone is trained and is a good coach? So this gets more into advanced degrees, what kind of training they might have, how many years have they been coaching, what levels of leader are they coaching at? We look at that as well. Maybe in some cases certification, but it's not a automatic requirement.
Because there's some people like you who have been around since before certifications, right? It's almost almost going backwards, right? When you get certified at your level, it's almost like going back to kindergarten, right?
Yes, it's a challenge in our field because there's a large crop of coaches that most companies would be very comfortable putting in front of their executives who've been in the field a long time, but they wouldn't necessarily go and get certified now because they wouldn't need to. Like
Marshall, for example.
Marshall's not going to go get certified.
Or Tony Robbins.
You can teach the certification.
They do the certification.
Right. So that's an interesting challenge that we have.
Yes. You and I fall into those categories.
Exactly. I've been in the field, as I said, 20 years,
Yes.
and I have not ever. I speak at many events for groups that provide certification, but haven't necessarily pursued that myself.
Yes. Very good. Very good. There's many certification bodies. Is there a difference?
Well, I'm not entirely well versed on the different bodies. I can only comment on the ones that I hear the most of, which obviously is the ICF, is really sort of the largest one, and the one that the most of the coaches that are certified in our network are going to be certified in the ICF process. I'm aware of the EMCC in Europe having a certification process. I believe the Association for Coaches in Europe as well does. And a newer one that I just heard about a little bit more recently is called BCC, Board Certified Coach.
Yeah.
But those are the only ones that I seem to hear the most of currently.
It seems like the industry is going through sort of a transformation, because before there was like a certification that encompassed everything, but now the industry seems to specialize a little bit more, and more executive coaching certifications are becoming available. Are clients already aware of these things, or is this just something new for them?
I don't know if they're aware of all the particulars and the different varieties of certification. And typically through most of my career, I haven't seen a specific request for certified coaches. However, in the last year or so, we're actually starting to see increased requests for coaches who are certified. And sometimes the person at the client who's hiring the coaches is more increasingly a certified coach themselves. So they may start to lean towards certified coaches as well. It's sort of a never-ending debate in our industry. It's one that I've been hearing about probably since I started.
To me, just to add maybe some fuel to the controversy, to me certification is the beginning, right? I think it's good for new coaches, sometimes for experienced coaches. I'm not sure if it really is beneficial, because imagine you're a CEO of a large company and then all of a sudden you get your bachelor's degree. Does that really help you?
Right.
Does it really help you? I doubt it. Now, if you get your master's degree maybe, or you get your doctorate, possibly, right, it's going to help you. But I think a bachelor's degree, probably not. And I think so it's, maybe it's not an unfair comparison, but I think going as an experienced coach who's been there for 20 years, going then for entry-level certification may not do you great benefit, is my sense. There's a bit controversy around that, no?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And I think what companies really is what they're trying to get at is there is a lot of coaches out there, and they're basically trying to figure out, how do I know this person's going to be a good coach?
Yes.
And so it's an attempt to qualify a coach is really what this is all about. And for most of the time, companies can do this on some of these other criteria I've referenced and get what they need determined as to who's qualified or not.
Right. So I think the coach at the level we're coaching, at the C level and up, CEOs, right? I think a bachelor degree wouldn't make much difference. It's really your experience that counts, because my sense is clients don't get us for the everyday problems, because they know how to deal with them. They get us for extraordinary problems, right? For issues that they haven't dealt with. Someone to get a thinking partner, somebody to help them brainstorm, not necessarily provide solutions, but maybe give frameworks and ideas on how to look at things, right? And then based on that, make decisions more quickly.
Right. Yeah, yes and no in one sense, because they have that thought partner, and sometimes they can't get clear input from people in the organization, especially when you're at the top. You don't get a lot of useful feedback sometimes. And at the same time, sometimes coaching is recommended to some of these leaders because they're not performing at a level that's desired by the company.
But is coaching really just for non-performers?
No. In fact, it's more often than not now is really used for the successful people that the company wants to invest in. And we did a new iteration of this research about 3 years ago, and we found that the use of coaching for poor performers has really decreased. Only about 25% of assignments currently get used for someone who's in some pretty big
So
trouble.
globally or in the U.S.?
Well, our research is mostly U.S. based.
Mostly U.S. based.
But we
Okay.
did have companies around the world answer. But
I hear there's a difference between East and West Coast, right? East Coast is still more like, what do you mean I need a coach? Is there something wrong with me? And then on the West Coast, like, what do you mean I don't get a coach? Is there something wrong with me? Because anybody who's somebody has a coach on the West Coast, it seems like.
And then maybe increasing everywhere, but it's very true in Silicon Valley where I reside that you're seeing Silicon Valley was an early adopter of coaching.
I think they're ahead of the game in many areas.
Yes,
Silicon Valley.
in this area, and I've seen some companies who are increasing the use of coaching almost as a perk for an employment at a particular company. Like, welcome to our company. Oh, by the way, here's the coach that we've assigned to you. I'm also seeing it used in much smaller or even startup companies. Traditionally, we see coaching in the big companies, but startup type companies are often, not often, but increasingly seeing, oh, why don't we get a coach for the founder and CEO? That might be something to be worth investing in. Very interesting trend.
Exactly. Because I think once we get to that executive level, it's hard to reach out to peers and ask for advice, or even if you're a CEO, it really is lonely at the top, isn't it? It's very hard to reach out or have somebody else to ask.
Right.
If I want to brainstorm with somebody, there's really nobody else.
Yeah, the coach does become that confidant, that thought partner, someone who can push back, not employed, is an employee of the company, not really worried about losing their job, or hopefully shouldn't be, and can really help structure, provide some clear thinking for the executive.
Because if it wouldn't look good for the CEO to ask employees for advice, really, they will. Sometimes they just want to give the good news rather than have an unbiased perspective.
Well, the good CEOs will ask for advice. The question is, will they always get the good advice they need? That's always the challenge as well.
Overall, where do you think the coaching industry is going? Do we still have time? Where do you think the coaching industry is going?
Well, I'm still seeing growth in the industry, and I'm seeing lots of growth. Our company has had about a 30% growth rate for the last 5 years in a row, and that's on top of 30%, on top of 30%.
Wonderful.
So we're still seeing a growth in the industry, and the big marquee conference that we attend in New York City by the Conference Board, the Executive Coaching Conference, continues to grow in attendance, and that's where all the big companies go to talk about coaching trends. And there's many companies that still want to do coaching but haven't really gotten into it yet. So at the moment, we're continuing to see, I think, growth in the use of coaching. We're also seeing coaching being attached to programs more often. So a company may have some kind of leadership program, or a program on a women in leadership program.
Nice.
Or other types of programs, so then they'll add coaching as a several hour or more add-on to the program. We're seeing coaching at lower levels. We're seeing coaching provided by internal coaches that the company has trained often. We're seeing that as a trend. I'm even seeing a company who's hiring external coaches, bringing them in to be internal coaches, and their only job is to coach full-time.
Nice.
So they don't do anything else at the same time. And I think we're going to continue to see more use of technology in many ways. Of course, many of us already do video-based coaching, but I think we could use apps more to our advantage. We could use maybe we could use wearables in some way, shape, or form. Way out in the future, maybe if there was a Google Glass or the Microsoft HoloLens.
So you mentioned the Google Glass, so they would be kind of like the secret participant.
Right, and maybe
the secret weapon.
Provide some input. I love following my leaders around and seeing what life is like for them, and any ways technology could help us.
I also sit sometimes in the meetings, and you can learn things that you may otherwise not learn in the coaching session.
Yes, absolutely.
It's kind of like a shortcut into the effectiveness of coaching, including assessments and so forth.
Right.
Yeah, very good. So, how do people get hold of you at CoachSource? Maybe you could just tell people how to get hold of you.
Sure. So CoachSource is at CoachSource.com, and I'm also active on LinkedIn. People can find me under my name, Brian Underhill. I'm on Twitter as well. I believe my tag is B Underhill.
Okay.
And I usually tweet out information about the field that I find, anything I find, usually once, twice a day. We put something out there as well.
Nice, wonderful. Anything you want to say as a closing statement?
Well, I am very encouraged about this field, as I know you are. We feel like this is a field that really helps advance human potential, human growth.
It's inspiring.
Inspiring. It makes the workplace a kinder place to be and get more out of people. And to be able to contribute to that on a worldwide basis, like we do, is really inspiring to me. And I'm just glad to be here.
Yes,
to talk to you
me too.
about it.
Yeah, what a blessing to have you. So I really thank you to take the time to stop by here in the Philippines and say hello to us, my wife Vicky and I, and your wife Julie. Really wonderful having you here. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All the best ahead and many more clients to come.
Thank you. Likewise.